Welcome back to the Mobile Home Park series. Hopefully, you found value from part one, two, and three. This is actually part four. So, in the first one, I talked about why mobile home parks, why people like it. The second one, I talked about my mobile home park. And then the third part, I talked about the due diligence process for my mobile home park. So, in part four, I want to talk about like what to expect when you take over the park, right? And this applies to apartments as well. But when I took over the park, I want to hit the ground running, right? I already had my performer plan in place. I wanted to renovate, 2 to 3 homes a month. I wanted to start with the homes that are easier fixes that cost around maybe $2,000 to $3,000 first, and then eventually get to the part where I'm to rent those out immediately to get more cash flow, and then slowly move on to the larger renovations, which were around $10,000. At that point, those would take a lot longer. But if I rented out the easiest ones first, it would get me more cash flow so that I can keep on going, right? And then while doing that, I wanted to tear down roughly between maybe 1 to 2 homes, per month to kind of clean up the park, so you can attract the higher quality tenant. So there's a lot of things that need to go on, right? So that was kind of one part that I had to do. On top of that, when you take over the park, they switch all the utilities under your name. So I had to switch Alabama Power to my name. The water company as well. You have to put down a deposit to change when you change ownership. I think the deposit was like $7,000, and so that's what we did immediately. So when I took over, typically the property manager is a little bit quiet. There's a lot of like changing of hands and all that, and I have to set my bank account. So I used Wells Fargo, because there's Wells Fargo here in California, and then there's Wells Fargo in Alabama. So usually some mobile home parks, they might only have like a local credit union. So if that's the case, when you're actually on site doing your due diligence, at that point, if they require you to be in person, you should start setting up your business bank accounts at that moment. But if you do see like a Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase, those national chains, obviously you can do it where you live, and then your property manager will deposit the money into the local branch over there. So fortunately, I had a Wells Fargo. I just Googled it. I saw it. The prior owner was doing it. So once we took over the park, it was very seamless because then they'd be able to pay, the property manager. They get paid on a weekly basis. The contractors get paid on a weekly basis. So, when I took over the park, like I said, we hit the ground running. Utility switched to my name, and immediately we started renovating I had a crew of 5 people. So, fortunately, my property manager, he actually used to be an electrician by trade. And typically, the property manager will live on site. So they get free lot rent. And then I think I was paying him around maybe $2,000 a month, to manage the park. So he would help do some repairs. He'd collect the rent. It was a husband and wife duo. So the husband was more of a handyman, and then the wife would do all the paperwork, the rent collection. So this is usually how it was. So kind of, when you're paying somebody $2,000 a month, which is $24,000 a year, the quality of property manager you'll get may not be the strongest. Obviously, when you can afford to pay $50,000 to $60,000, it's a lot better. But to initially save money, and I think what was nice was he was a handyman as well, and we needed that for this heavy distress park. So he was helping with that, and we also had another part-time maintenance guy that was kind of helping the property manager mow the lawn. So when you have 55 acres, obviously it's a full-time job just to mow the lawns. Once you finish mowing one side of the 55 acres, you have to restart again. And it takes like a week to do that. And the grass grows very fast, especially during the rainy seasons. They have a lot of crabweed in Alabama, and that thing can grow from like 0 to 5 feet, in like 2 months if you don't like maintain it. So obviously we had the property manager there, and then he used to like run his own little construction company, so he knew a lot of guys who were willing to work for like maybe 10 to $12 an hour, to fix up these homes. So they would actually live in one of the homes. They would actually pay me rent, and then they would then get paid on a weekly basis to fix up the homes. So it was kind of nice, right? They would live in the home, but then they would also pay me rent, but then they also would fix up the homes, and I would pay them. So upon that, I immediately had to buy an excavator. So the excavator costed around, I think, $37,000. Fortunately, you can finance it. So I think I could finance it where it was $700 a month. And to rent an excavator for a day would be around $300 a day. So I figured if I use it more than 3 days a month, then it's actually worth it to consider buying it and financing it. So that's exactly what I did because I would need to use it every day, right? Because when you're tearing down homes, you need an excavator. When you're doing plumbing repair, you need an excavator. And, when, and I had all the above, right? Like I had a lot of, 20 homes to demolish. I had, 500 feet of plumbing to fix. I definitely knew I was going to need it. And the moment you don't need it no more anymore, you can sell it. And so that was my strategy, was to have it so that things can get fixed immediately. So I was able to finance it through Wells Fargo actually, and it's $70 monthly payments. I had to buy a new lawnmower. So they were using like your typical lawnmower handheld one from Home Depot, but when you own 55 acres, you need like a commercial grade one. So I was able to get one for, I think it was like around $4,000. But what was nice was I got it financed over, I think, 4 years, and it was 0% interest. So my monthly payment was around $180 a month. So I had to get that. And on top of that, I had to, unfortunately hire security, because of a lot of these vacant park owned homes. A lot of homeless people, a lot of vagrants, transients will occupy those homes sometimes, because it's been vacant for so long. They'll just kind of sneak in at night. So I had to hire, kind of part time security to, number one, help with rent collections. It's a little more intimidating when you have a security guard collecting rent, so it helps with collections. Number two is they can kind of rotate through different hours of the nighttime to make sure that there's no like vandalism at the park. There's no homeless people or vagrants trying to go into the park on the homes, and by having the security there, it did prevent a lot of trouble. Like they did, uh, they work with the local police department. They would do citizens arrest, and then call the cops to do that. So it did kind of show that I wanted to take care of the tenants and make the park a better community. Safe affordable housing for families to live in. So basically, I had to hire that, and so as you can kind of see, all these fixed expense go up, right? Like there's a lot of fixed expense um, when you're managing 55 acres. I wasn't really quite aware of that. Like you just need someone almost full time, 40 hours a week just mowing the lawn. And what's nice about having your own, lawnmower that you're paying on payroll is that when my property manager needs help fixing something, because sometimes you need two people to do stuff, he can hop off his lawnmower and then come help him with things here and there, right? Versus we hire a landscaping company, they just come in, do their job, and leave, right? They don't really help. So that's why I wanted to have someone on site there that could help the property manager to get things done a little faster. But as you can see, all these fixed expenses going up, right? So having the dumpster, every time you empty the dumpster through Alabama, it was like $500, and one mobile home teardown would fill up the dumpster. And sometimes the garbage company they want to pick up the dumpster every Tuesday, like they said. So we have to constantly call them, and if they don't take out the dumpster, we have delays and teardowns, and that's what I experienced a lot of. And having lights throughout 55 acres, that's a fixed expense. The water bill, 55 acres, that's a high expense, and just a lot of like tree trimming. When I took over the park, I had to tear down like 8 trees, and these are like 100-foot trees or 55 acres. And if it's near the power lines, the power companies will take it down. So we had to call the power company to remove some trees. But then there's trees that were like near the home that were like about to fall. So I had to spend around like I think $6,000 to get rid of all those trees. So I was pretty big expense there. I underestimated that definitely. And so basically, you're collecting like $6,000 in rent, but you have a lot of fixed expense between the property manager, you have a part-time maintenance guy, you have security, you have the excavator, the lawnmower, utilities, electric, the water, garbage. So you can start to see there's a lot of fixed expenses that sort of accumulate, but only 30 out of 200 lots are occupied. If it was 200 out of 200 occupied, the fixed expense still stay the same. So that's where you get the economies of scale as you start to infill the park. But in the beginning, you're biting in the negative initially. So we started that, and obviously, once the tenants start seeing that you're renovating these vacant homes, they're gonna put in a lot of requests, right? So I had 15 park owned homes. Um, they started to say, hey, we want the roof's leaking over here. We want skirting on our thing. So, you start getting more requests to touch up the current park owned homes, and you want to do that. So, because for the good tenants that they're paying. And then when I came on board, I had to start evicting, about 10 tenants. It was unfortunately during COVID, and it was very hard to evict people in Alabama. Like anytime I tried to evict somebody in a park owned home, they would claim that they got COVID. So because of that, it would delay it again. So, it just took a while to evict some tenants. And eventually it just got to the point where it just said, hey, like, I did cash for keys almost, where I'll just pay you, um, you know, $300. It's going to cost me $600 to get an attorney, and then you give me the keys, and we call it even, right? So that was actually more effective in Alabama. But the hard one was trying to evict the tenant-owned homes, because one tenant-owned home tenant didn't pay rent for like a year from the prior owner, and they were paying like I think 100 or $200 a month in lot rent. And it was going to cost me like $800 to evict them, and they just kept on claiming COVID, 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 to the point where it was delayed almost like a year. So I just thought, well, I thought Alabama was landlord friendly, but it was very challenging to evict people. I felt like it was almost like California, whereas in Oklahoma, 15-day notice, someone gets evicted, right? So I was a little bit humbled by that, and that was on me that I didn't do more research as to the eviction process in Alabama, right? So that was definitely on me, and my offsite property managers didn't really know as well how to kind of evict and what that process entailed. So it became a challenge, and once one tenant doesn't pay, like people know that, oh, like I'm not going to pay either, right? So it kind of like cascades, unfortunately. So it was a lot easier for me to either evict or negotiate cash or keys with the park owned homes, but it was very challenging to evict and get rid of people who own their homes, and that process. So that was kind of my experience in the southeast. Obviously, if you're like in a better mobile home park market, like like California, for example, it's all tenant owned homes, and um, it's usually these tenants will pay a little more lot rent. So it just kind of almost felt the same, right? Like it was kind of like lower end tenants. And another thing I realized too is like a lot of these tenants, like you try to raise, like if some tenant was paying $200, the market lot rent was for a new home was 300, so 250 was the middle. If you try to raise it, they're like very resistant to it, like out the gate. So you want to fix things up first and then slowly raise it. But like for them, $25 a month is a lot of money for them, right? Because they're on fixed income. So that's another barrier that you're gonna have to go through as well, that I went through. And so basically that's kind of at a high level what happened. So when I hit the ground running, basically a lot of reality hit, and you want to get all your ducks aligned, and now you have a huge, huge, huge renovation team that you're managing. So hopefully you found value from this part, and hope to see you in part 5.